Blame, sometimes called Blam, Blamu, or some other variation of a mispronunciation, is a manga from 1997 created by Tsutomu Nihei about a man named Killy who travels an enormous labyrinthian megacity searching for something called the net terminal gene, which will supposedly fix this fallen world. And that's really about it, to be honest. You see, Blame is a dark story that's very light on actual story, at least if we're talking about the stuff that's explicitly shown. There's not much in terms of exposition or explanations, but there are plenty of explications if you're willing to read some forums and write some of the story yourself. And therein lies the biggest issue most people have with Blame. It's very confusing, especially at the start. There's no extended tutorial telling you what's going on. You're just thrown into the thick of it, with the expectation that you'll eventually put the pieces together and bask in the beauty of the completed picture. And then it just ends, and you're more confused than you were at the start. This is the typical Blame experience, which might make you wonder why this series is so many people's favorite manga, including PewDiePie. And the short answer is, it's really cool. I don't think there's a single page in this manga that isn't fun to look at, which is very impressive because what's going on usually isn't fun, at least not for the characters. Every panel just oozes with that late 90s, early 2000s grungy aesthetic. This is no sanitized sci-fi setting, even if the seemingly infinite world of Blame can often appear devoid of life. It's still there, skulking in the shadows down claustrophobic hallways or hiding just out of sight, somewhere in the vast landscapes of a one-screen world ravaged by the progress of technology. And one piece of tech that's worth drawing special attention to would be the gravitational beam emitter. It's this tiny little pistol that does a lot of damage to its target and does a lot for this manga. Because when Killy uses this gun, you get to see the scale of this world. Of course, you get to see that with other things too, but this gun, I mean, it keeps things flashy. And it's a good thing Killy has one of the only ones that's left because the stuff he's up against does not go down easily. Grotesque monsters, murderous machines, people who stretch the very definition of people. These are the inhabitants of a cyberpunk wonderland crafted by ancient, mysterious, and unholy architects. Speaking of architects, I am now required to inform you that Blame's creator, Nihei, had a background in construction which he took with him when he changed career paths. He also had a great love for the biomechanical artwork of H.R. Geiger, and these two things are pretty obvious if you just look at like anything from this manga. He also really liked Halo. Now, Halo did come out after Blame had already started, but that didn't stop Nihei from becoming the most hardcore fan of Halo in Japan. He even worked with Bungie on the old Halo graphic novel anthology. If you ever wondered what happened to Sergeant Johnson after Jenkins got infected, then give his short story a read. Well, I guess you wouldn't really be reading it because there isn't any dialogue, but you get what I mean. This doesn't have much to do with Blame, I just wanted to mention it because, as you may know, I am a big fan of Halo, and I only just found out about this information. I still feel all giddy inside. But I guess it does allow me to say this next statement with some authority. An action-packed adventure with a horror atmosphere set on a mysterious world of metal with both narrow hallways and open areas, filled with ancient relics, aggressive security systems, and aberrant creatures. Clearly, Blame is the Halo CE of manga. Alright, I'm just joking. Although what Blame is kind of a matter of debate. I mean, sure, you could just say it's a psychological sci-fi action horror manga, but, you know, that's just genre. What it all means depends on who you ask. Some people think it's one big critique of society, while others will tell you it's just the fever dream of an artistically gifted crazy person. Me? I don't really know where I stand. I do like the idea that this is a sci-fi representation of things post-Garden of Eden. I mean, you got the fallen world, the corrupted mankind, very Augustinian. There's also a striking lady who haunted my thoughts with her lengthy figure and serene, melancholic face, a bittersweet beauty, a wistful creature, an almost angelic being, undimmed amidst the corpses and ruins of a long-dead city. And one that certainly caused me to fall into the muddy concupiscence of the flesh. Very Augustinian. But after finishing it, I'm more inclined to believe it was all a metaphor for purgatory. That, or it's just a story about a man trying to find a cure for woke mind virus. Really, I have no idea what I read, but I do think that was kind of the point. There are so many different ways to interpret this manga, but that does make it difficult to appreciate this manga the first time through. At least it was difficult for me. Before reading it, I had heard nothing but high praise for Blame, and during the early parts of the manga, I can honestly say I was having the time of my life reading this thing. The artwork, the setting, the atmosphere, it all kind of speaks for itself. I also just liked how every time Killy used his little big gun, we'd zoom out and see the shot tear through multiple layers of the megacity. I liked seeing seeing all the different creatures, all the different locations, and all the different eccentricities of this brave new world. It was all perfect, and I just couldn't wait to see what would happen next over and over again. And sure, I did feel a little lost a lot of the time. Don't even get me started on the time travel part. But I was confident that it would all come together in the end, and then I got to the end, and it didn't. It was the typical Blame experience. I finished this manga more confused than I was at the start. But my confusion wasn't just directed at the stuff that happens in this manga, it was directed at the fans too. I was confused about why so many people cared so much about this manga. Because I felt betrayed. I was supposed to be blown away by the pinnacle of environmental storytelling, but that didn't happen. Because that wasn't what I read. What I read was a disjointed mess crafted by a guy who can't write a story on his own, so you have to do all the heavy lifting to make it mean something. And sure, he knows how to draw a building and make a cool-looking design, but stories are more than just visuals, right? Was I in the wrong for expecting more than a collection of cool drawings? What, did I have to read the wiki to understand why I wasn't allowed to dislike Blame? Was I just not smart enough to get it? Because I didn't. I didn't get it at all, and it was frustrating, and not the fun kind of frustrating where I could tell there was an answer out there and I just had to find it. It was the kind of frustration that made me want to just move on to something else. That's how I felt when I finished Blame. The conclusion made me question why I even read this thing to begin with. I was incredibly disappointed. Especially because I really cared at the start. There was clearly something here, right? I mean, if not, then how did I even make it to the end? What hooked me and where did it go wrong? That was something I had to find out. And I figured the best way to get my answer would be to just reread this thing. So I went back and I reread that first volume and I searched for my answer, and I kid you not, I completely changed my opinion almost immediately. It's like everything just clicked. I felt like a fool. I mean, I didn't just not trust the plan, I missed the plan completely. I am sorry for doubting you, Nihei. I get why Fujimoto loves you so much. By the way, he's the main reason I decided to read Blame. You see, I love Chainsaw Man, and Fujimoto said his two big inspirations were Fooly Cooly and Abara. Now, I've already seen Fooly Cooly multiple times, but I never read Abara before, and when I found out it was made by the same guy who made Blame, I felt like I needed to start with that one, even though they're not connected to each other. And I'm glad that I did, because he's not a hack. Nihei, he might actually be a genius. There were still plenty of things that I still don't understand about Blame, but what I did finally understand was the appeal of this story, and these characters, and the world of Blame. And I'd like to think that I could explain it in exhaustive detail, but even if that's true, I think it would kind of ruin the point. Nihei is on record saying that he wanted to make a story that captured the same level of confusion that an ant must feel when it wanders through a single room in a building in a country, on a planet, in a solar system, in a galaxy inside a universe. Could it really understand even just a small piece of the larger world it was seeing? Could it even understand its place in all this, or why things happen the way that they do? Probably not. And that's so wonderful. Like, literally, think of all the wonder that's brewing in that tiny ant brain. All that meaning that's not made up, it's just based on something we don't fully understand. And that's perfectly all right. You don't need all the answers. Not everything needs to be explained. There's a magic to mystery. Now, I'm not saying that Blame is good just because it's difficult to understand. I'm saying it's good because it makes you want to understand. It knows what to show, what to tell, and what not to, so it can quit while it's still ahead. There's a reason people still talk about this old manga, and that reason is because there's still so much to talk about, like the character origins, or the manga timeline, or even the volume order. And sure, you could seek out the wiki and watch a bunch of videos explaining the deep lore hidden in all the backgrounds and text boxes, but I kind of think you lose something when you learn too much. Now, don't get me wrong, I still did that, but wait until after you finish the manga and sort out your own perspective first. It's better that way. You want to hear something funny though? This manga, it wasn't even supposed to be called Blame. That was a translation error that stayed along for the ride. The real title is the sound the main character's gun makes. But now the funny thing is that I think this mistranslation is strangely fitting for this series. It's like from the very start, another ant had already begun interpreting the room in its own way, and it told you about this interpretation, and now you're even more confused than you were supposed to be. If you haven't read Blame and you want to get into it, there are a couple of things worth knowing. First, there are two versions of Blame. the Tokyo Pop Edition, and the Vertical Comics Master Edition. The Tokyo Pop version came out first and is 10 volumes, while the Master Edition was released later and is 6 volumes. Now don't be fooled by the lower number, both versions include all the same material. It's just that the Master Edition combines a few volumes into one. The main difference between the two is that the Master Edition has a much cleaner image and a new translation. Some people say that the darker image of the Tokyo Pop version fits the atmosphere more, but you do lose a lot of detail. Regarding the translation quality of either version, I really don't think it matters. There's like 12 sentences each volume. It's a visual story first and foremost. I read the Master Edition, and that one seems to be the more accessible version, so it's the one I'd recommend, but you do you. Also, be sure to check out Noise once you finish the main manga. It's a prequel that does clear up some confusion. And if you don't mind 3D anime, then there's the Blame movie on Netflix. You can watch that too. I do mind 3D anime though, so I didn't watch it. No idea if I missed out. But if you just want more manga, then check out Knights of Sidonia and Manga. They could be sequels, or prequels, or entirely separate. The jury's still out on this one. If you're looking for something similar, you could check out Girls Last Tour. Many are saying it's like Blame, but moe. Well, one of you is saying that anyway. And if you have already read Blame, then let me know what you thought of it. You're not going to change my opinion, I'm kind of dug in at this point, but there's nothing wrong with some healthy discussion. Anyway, until next time, Ave Maria, Deus Volt, and a big thank you to all the cultured.